Fresh from the royal tour to Italy last month, the King and Queen are heading off again, and this time to Canada. And, well, Kate and Lizzie, you're going to be joining them on this royal trip. So it's not a long one. I think they're on the ground for less than a day.
Yes.
Right.
Less than 24 hours from landing, taking off again in Ottawa. Whistle-stop tour.
So, clearly an important trip. What's on the agenda?
Yeah, it is an important trip because it's the King's first trip as monarch, as King of Canada. And, of course, everything that's happening in the background. You know, we've had Trump saying that Canada should be a 51st state. We've had Mark Carney, the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, in the Oval Office saying Canada is not for sale, never will be. So amid all of this, we have the King flying in to open the Assembly. So this is a big deal. You know, it doesn't happen very often. He'll be delivering the speech from the throne in the Canadian Parliament and sending a very clear message, which essentially the Canadians will say is reinforcing that message from Mark Carney, you know, to Trump, that the country's not for sale. It's a very powerful sign that the country is, you know, sovereign and independent.
So, I mean, this really is important international diplomacy at play.
It really is, and I think, you know, the King obviously sits above politics. He can't say anything, but the fact that he's going, I think, is for, you know, the Canadians have invited him. That is significant that it is happening now. I think he would have gone last year had he not have been undergoing the treatment for cancer. This year, he wouldn't have been able to go if the election had been when they'd planned for it to be, which was later in the year. The fact the election got brought forward has opened up, has paved the way to allow him to go now, which I think timing-wise for the Canadians is very important. And everyone we've, you know, spoken to says that this is a really significant moment. The monarch hasn't opened, done the state opening of Parliament, delivered the speech since the late Queen in 1957. So it's quite a rare moment.
But also, we find ourselves in a very difficult diplomatic water, in as much as the newly elected PM, Mark Carney, has said that in light of the extension of a second state visit to Donald Trump, Mark Carney told Sky News that, he said, to be frank, Canadians weren't impressed by that gesture. Given the circumstance, it was at a time when we were being quite clear around the issues around sovereignty.
This has been such a tightrope walk for the King, and it's probably more explosive, I think, than any other diplomatic situation he's found himself in recently, because, of course, Keir Starmer has very different foreign policy goals to Mark Carney, to Canada. And for Starmer, King Charles was his ace in the pack. He went out to the Oval Office in February and he pulled out this letter from Charles, put it on the table in front of Trump and said, look, there's your historic second state visit invitation. It's unprecedented, and it was all this massive charm offensive at the exact time that Canada was trying to say, back off to Trump. Basically, you can't have us, you can't buy us, we're not for sale, you can't annex us.
But it was also 24 to 48 hours before the famous showdown in the Oval Office between Trump and Zelensky.
So everything was getting incredibly heated and incredibly controversial. And actually, Charles has been trying to make these subtle shows of support for Canada. You know, they have been there, but they've just been so much more subtle than Starmer's very theatrical pulling out of the letter. So this visit to Canada is actually a moment when the King can be far less subtle, far more direct, and actually appear in person. And he is Canada's protective shield, because if the completely unthinkable were ever to happen and Trump were to send the military over the border, he would be trying to militarily annex a country that counts the King as head of state. And Donald Trump does actually quite like the King.
He does, yeah.
This is Carney's ace in the pack, basically.
So, actually, you might not be there for long, but every second counts.
Definitely.
Yes, short but sweet, but impactful, I think, is how the palace was sort of saying it to me when I was speaking to them about it yesterday. I think it's very, like Lizzie says, the timing has just sort of worked out. It's not that this thing has happened with Trump and Carney and now Charles is flying in as a result of that. These things are in the planning for months and months and months. But the timing couldn't be more poignant.
Absolutely. Timing has also played a key factor in what will be the French President Emmanuel Macron's state visit to the UK. What can you tell us about this?
So this state visit from Macron will come at the beginning of July. These state visits are incredibly important. They're all about strengthening relationships and ties between the UK and other countries. And of course, the UK's relationship with France, they're one of our closest neighbours. And in a post-Brexit world, diplomatically, that relationship is incredibly important for us. So I think, they have a very warm relationship. We saw that at play in 2023 when we were there in France. So I think a very important visit for Macron.
And they have a good relationship, don't they, the King and Macron?
Of course, and Charles is impeccable at speaking French when he visits France, which always goes down fantastically.
Really
with
And will come into play in Canada, of course.
Of course, because they've got a French community there too. So yeah, I mean, he's very dapper, isn't he, Emmanuel Macron? And he's a very charming man. He even was charming with Trump, which must have taken some guts, I think.
Bridget Macron and the Queen get on as well, very well. They both have a shared passion for literacy projects, so they've done some sort of joint engagements in the past as well.
More than ever, it would feel that the royals are being deployed to use this soft power. We've seen William, being sent to kind of, fluff the skirts of Donald Trump, some might say.
Love that metaphor.
that creates quite a picture, doesn't it, in the mind's eye?
I think that's a newspaper cartoon somewhere, surely.
But you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's
no,
the
he
charm
does.
offensive. And the fact that Trump is such a fan of our royal family, and not that everything is about Trump right now, but we are using our royal trips to land a lot of soft power messages, aren't we?
But so much is about Trump right now because he's reshaping the world. So, I mean, I think the royal family, in a way, has never been more important to Britain's national interest because it really is, and you can see in the way that Starmer conducts himself, it really is the thing that Britain has that other countries don't, because even other European monarchies do not have the cultural impact that the British monarchy has, and particularly in America. Americans love the British royal family. They don't have the same interest in the Spanish monarchy. They don't have the same interest in the Dutch monarchy. But they absolutely love Britain's monarchy, and Trump is somebody who, he has a knowledge and interest in royals back down the decades. Obviously he was famously interested in Princess Diana in a way that might have even been uncomfortable at points, but he is somebody, it resonates with him, and it is a way to speak to him and to get across to him that Britain is an ally. Now, there might even be points for Starmer where that's awkward domestically because of the attitudes to Trump in Britain. But in terms of securing the concrete, the trade deal, for example, the concrete goals that Britain has, Charles really, and the King and William really have been absolutely fundamental to British foreign policy.
But what's interesting, isn't it, is that neither of them been quiet in terms of speaking out when they think it matters, certainly when it comes to supporting Ukraine, for example, at a time when it felt like maybe Trump didn't have the Ukraine's back.
That's right. I mean, Charles has actually been very outspoken on his support for Ukraine, and also in the choice of some of the engagements that he's carried out. William, similarly, we were with him in Estonia, and he went to visit a school where Ukrainian refugee children were being taught. So we're very clear on where the royal family stand on Ukraine, where the British government stand on Ukraine.
And it's not in the same place as Donald Trump necessarily. Well,
there was that awful, exchange, wasn't there, in the Oval Office between Zelensky and Trump, and I think that was quite shocking to people watching that, particularly in the palace, to see how that would play out. So that to be a fly on the wall when Charles has that conversation with Trump when he comes over will be really interesting.
Will be interesting. September is what we're being told at the moment, but nothing locked in or confirmed just yet.